Welcome to Reality Bytes. This is Desley Casey and
Pavlic.
Today we have very privileged to have a guest, Beverly Baker from National Older Women's Network.
That's right.
New South Wales branch, is that right, Beverly?
It's actually both. I'm the president of the National Older Women's Network,
Yes.
and I am also the chair of the New South Wales Older Women's Network. So I've got a foot in both camps. There's no difference. The national body is an extension of the state bodies. So we work really closely with the states. The states are autonomous. The national body's not. The national body has to do what the states tell it. The states do what the states boards tell them to do.
Right. And do you, just out of curiosity, and from my older days in a past life in mental health, do you have state representatives on the board of the national body?
Yes, New South Wales has state representatives on the national body.
Yeah. Okay.
Each state is entitled to 2 representatives onto the national body, and the national body is then free to, with the agreement of the board, to ask people to come in for specific purposes or short-term activities. We have Dr. Shirley Randall is our patron, as our ambassador, and we have 2 patrons, Gillian Tiggs and Quentin Bryce.
Yes, I know Quentin from my days in mental health.
No, they are just amazing women, amazing women.
Yeah.
Yes, she's lovely.
So a little bit about yourself, Beverly, in say a minute or 2.
Oh, well, you know, I'm 72, so it's going to take longer than a minute. Look,
power to you.
I'm a grandma. I have 10 grandchildren. They give me absolute joy and pleasure. Aged between 24 and 6. I have been engaged in the not-for-profit sector for nearly all of my adult life. I started off working with the P&C when my children went to school and became the president of the state association. I then left that as I don't believe in dead presidents hanging around, and I went to work in the not-for-profit sector. So I worked for the FSHD Global Research Foundation, which is the largest foundation supporting people with facio-humeral scapular dystrophy, where once it was thought that it was a very benign form of dystrophy, it turns out to be a very aggressive and the most common form of dystrophy that people live with. So just the research that organisation did has blasted the whole knowledge about FSHD out of the water. So, yep, I've had an interesting life. I'm currently the CEO of the Aboriginal Education Council. And that is one of the oldest charities established to support Aboriginal students of any age change their life using through education. It does not support scholarships to private schools, but it certainly supports scholarships for women, for men, for people changing their lives using education. So targeting people at the lower end of the socio-economic scale and enabling them to improve their lives.
And how did you become involved, Beverly, with the National Older Women's Network?
Look, I have a reputation for sorting out messes. And I didn't know. I was just somebody rang, a friend rang and said, "Oh, what are you doing at the moment?" You know, and I said, "Oh, you know, this and that and these and those." And she said, "How would you like to take over this Older Women's Network?" And I just, not take it over, that's the wrong terminology. She said, "How would you like to come onto the board of the Older Women's Network?" And I said, "Yep, that should be fine." So I nominated, I had a look at the website. So, yeah, they sound like they're pretty decent sort of people. So I got involved in that, realised that there were some issues that were behind the scenes that needed to be sorted so that the organisation was on an absolutely professional foot and there was no window of opportunity for anyone to criticise what was going on. And just through time and the capacity, I mean, we're all older women, so as people get tired, get sick, get something else, it moves through. And I was asked if I would stand as the chair of the state association, which I did, and was supported in that role. And then time moved on a bit more, and then the president of the National Association said that she wanted to get out, that she had had enough, that she had been working long enough in the area and she wanted to do something different. And so I was then asked if I would stand for that role, and I said yes. And in October last year, I was voted into that position.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
I was just going to ask if you could tell us a little bit about what does the Older Women's Network do? From your website, you've got your fingers in a lot of pies by the looks of it.
Well, old women have got their fingers in a lot of pies. We've been, it's that broad church, that the whole issue of being older doesn't mean your brain suddenly stops working. Right. The Older Women's Network was established in New South Wales around 35 years ago. It came as a result of the Pensioner and Superannuates Association, where women realising that a lot of that was around the superannuation of men and not a lot of attention was being paid to the needs of women. So the Older Women's Network was established as a very small group. But as it started, it realised that there were a whole pile of issues that were impacting on women, not the least of which is superannuation. And so it's established now. It's a collegiate, it's a support network, it's an advocacy body, it's an information source. We have 19 branches across the state that run courses for the women in those areas. They do the things that the women in those areas want them to do. So that the state body is different, because our main job is support for our groups, but taking their information forward and trying to get their lives made better. So we were one of the first to discover the abuse that was going on in nursing homes, and are still leading the charge, trying to get people who are in nursing homes treated with basic human rights, not have somebody decide what the impact of a criminal offence is on them, but actually seriously allow those people the dignity of saying this is a crime, sexual abuse is a crime. Just because you may have Alzheimer's or something else does not lessen the impact of that crime. So we're very much involved now with trying to get legislation based on basic human rights for people who are in care. And as the Aged Care Royal Commission has demonstrated, we were really on the money. We knew people were being very badly abused in those institutions, and that we were right. And it's like any representative organisation. If we hear somebody say, oh, such and such, we go, oh, yeah, that's interesting. If we hear two people say the same thing, we prick up our ears. If three people saying the same thing, we know we've got a problem. Yeah. And so and those networks exist everywhere. That, if you've got somebody, it's an outrider. If it's got two, maybe it's a coincidence. If there's three, we've got a pattern here. And that's the way that we operate. We, again, one of the first to blow the whistle on homelessness of older women, because we were seeing them coming and saying, I've got nowhere to live. I finally had the courage to leave my husband. Where can I go? And I've got 2 paid staff. They're only part-time staff, but that's where our money goes, to support the staff doing the work. We're not paid for the trauma that they suffer when women come in and they can't get them a place, because they absolutely go above and beyond to try to find a place for those women who have summons their courage and finally run away from their abuser, only be told there's nowhere for you to go and perhaps you need to live in your car. We can't give that advice. We won't. We will do everything we can to make sure they find a place. So we work very closely with different housing providers and talking and sharing information and putting forward the arguments that are now going forward, because I think everyone now knows that the loss of social housing is impacting across the age rate, because you've got young people who can't get a house, get into homes, get into housing, they're living on the streets. You've got middle-aged people in the same position who have lost their jobs and can no longer afford their rents. And you've got older women who are the fastest growing demography in that sector. of simply not being able to afford to rent, or have lost their house because they didn't understand the financial implications of what their partners were doing with the money, who they'd lent it to, who they'd borrowed against, what they'd done. The partner dies and they suddenly find out they're homeless. You know, so we've got a raft and layer upon layer of issues, and it's our job to stay on top of those issues as much as we can, and to blow the whistle on them, so that it's not just swept under the carpet and, oh, we can't talk about that, or there's nothing we can do about it. We will bang the drum until somebody listens.
Right.
Yeah. I'm just listening to you and the wonderful things you say. Have you noticed that in the last 2-3, since the pandemic started, that the older women's homelessness is rising during this period?
We've certainly noticed that there's been an increase in domestic violence in that area, and it's not just, it's across the board. So Aboriginal women, non-Aboriginal women, cold women are all now saying that this is increased, because if you are now locked up, I mean, if your abuser goes to work, the time frame in which the abuse can occur is shrunk. But if your abuser is home with you 24/7, that expands the time that person has to do the damage. And we know that there's a whole raft of issues that we need to tease out. We know that there were 2 million women who drew money out of their super. We don't know how many of those were coerced into drawing money out of their super. We definitely know there were some, but we need to know exactly how many, because if women pull money out of their super, they already don't have enough, and now they're going to have even less. And if you're under coercive control, waiting to get your super to run away from home has now just been made more difficult. So there's just layer upon layer of stuff that we've just got to pull apart. So we know that domestic violence has increased, and that's from all of the providers who are looking. We know that more and more women are looking for homes because they want to get away from where they are. And we know that they are suffering because they have, 2 million women in this country have drawn out their super. That's an enormous amount of women who are going to be, when they retire, a lot of, and it's not just 20,000, because that 20,000 is invested and rolls over and grows. So that is now 20,000 out of their pot. And if the super funds are investing the money in shares, we've just seen what happens to the share portfolio. It's just crashed through the floor. Yeah. So you've got added, everything is just layer upon layer upon layer, and it's looking at all of those issues. So the pandemic has hit women really hard. They're predominantly the frontline workers. They're the nurses, predominantly the nurses. They're the teachers. They're the people who are in the food industry. All of those industries are under attack. And we saw prior to the pandemic the most hateful rules that said that overtime and penalty rates would be slashed for people in those industries. Now, they're low paid. For goodness sake, why would you then attack the penalty rates of those people under the guise of saying more people would be employed? We know that's a lie.
Yeah.
Yes. And talking about super, I'm of the age, Beverly, where super wasn't around when I started work. It would have been easily 20 years of my working life before.
1992 is when it came in.
1992. Well, I'm 65, so I'm sorry, I can't do the maths quite that quickly, but it basically wasn't around for, I started working at 15. So
and prior to after that, after 1992, there was nothing to stop. Every time you change jobs, and most of us have had numerous jobs, your employer would determine where that super went. If you changed jobs, your next employer would determine where that super went. And you couldn't get that super, but all the charges were still there. So you may have had 10 jobs with about $1,000 in each of the super funds. And after the years, 15 years of work, you look back, there's nothing there because all of the super funds have taken them away. Now, that did change about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
when, you know, your right to choose your super and all of that stuff. It tidied up that super industry, and you can actually determine for yourself what fund your super goes into. But when I started to earn superannuation, that wasn't an option. It
No.
wasn't there.
No, and so I worked in government at the time.
Yeah.
And so it went to in mental health, and it basically went to the state super fund or whatever it was called at the time. They decided. When I was CEO of a small not-for-profit charity, if people didn't already have their super accounts, because I also employed a lot of people with mental illness who may not have worked for many years. And so it gave them a choice between two super funds, unless they had their own that they particularly wanted to keep. And that was the way. And at the time, we gave the choice of the two top performing super funds at that time, you know, for the employees to then designate which one they wanted. So they, whilst it was minimal choice, it was still a bit of choice than nothing whatsoever. But when you talk about women and homelessness, and the highest cohort of the population who are becoming homeless are women over the age of 55. And most of these women also, Beverly, I would suggest, are finding it very difficult to get a job.
And that's the really sad thing, is that women over the age of 45, your most productive years, if you're 65, you know the energy you had at 45, and you know the energy you have at 65. They are your most productive years. I mean, I'm 72. I know when I was at my best. I know the employers who got the best out of me. And that was between the ages of 40 and 60. Those people got the best out of me. Your best and most productive years, I believe, are between 40 and 60. Because at 40, you've had your children, you know what's going on, you're comfortable, you're comfortable in your own skin. So you're not worried about, you know, who am I and where am I going and what am I doing? You actually have got a handle on that. If you've decided to have kids, you've got them. If you've decided not to, you're comfortable with that decision. Therefore, you are at the peak, and you can give your employer the best he can or she can possibly get. Yet now we're hearing that women over the age of 45 are struggling to find work. You know, I mean, I can't believe businesses are that stupid.
Oh, they are.
Why would you throw away your best talent when, for what? You know, just stupid.
Well, I know that myself, I've gone into interviews and they take one look at me because I've got a few grey hairs, and you know you're not going to get a job.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't say it outright. I'd prefer them to say, look, you're too old, but they know they'd be taken for discrimination if they did that. Yeah. But I've had people, I had a recruitment agency tell me, we're not putting you forward for those sort of jobs or office clerk or anything because you've got too many skills and you'll get bored. Now,
how dare they?
How
dare anybody tell you what will bore you?
Yeah, exactly. Why shouldn't I be the one deciding what will bore me, what I'm doing now as to what I, you know, did even 10 years ago, or what you make of the job. Yes, I don't get paid as much as what I did, but I'm working and I'm doing some work, you know, mainly because I can't afford to live on job seeker alone.
Who can? And what an insult to say to women over the age of 60, you have to go and apply for all of these jobs that you know you're not going to get. I mean, it's if you are valueless, that your time means nothing. That is such an insult, because it doesn't mean nothing. You've got plenty of things that you can do to contribute back to your society that would give your society more than they would ever ask, ever pay you. Yet here we are, as women over the age of, and for me, I'm above retirement age, so they can't do that to me anymore. But for women between those, that the ages that we know they're not going to be employed, going through the stupid hoops, having the insults of being told they're going to learn how to write CVs. Even if they'd read their CV, they'd found out that they were teaching people how to write CVs. You know, this is just an insult, and it's ageist in the extreme. It says that a 60-year-old is the same as a 20-year-old. A 20-year-old who has never been able to get into the workforce is treated exactly the same as a 60-year-old who has had 40 years of experience, 40 years of work, 40 years of knowledge, and they're treated the same. And they're both treated as if they are bludgers, as if they've got no talent, they are lazy, and nobody's got any time for them. That's an insult to the 20-year-old, but it's a massive insult to a 60-year-old.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And if you also take into account, we're talking about ageism, and you know, we've had a bit of a quick read of your report that you've got.
what can you expect at your age?
An investigation of recent experiences of age discrimination by older adults accessing healthcare. And we do want to get onto healthcare as well, because you've touched on it a wee bit, and I'd like to explore that a little bit further with you. The ageism, now I know myself, until I live in a rural area on the south coast of New South Wales. Until I came to the south coast, the GP always treated me seriously. And then I came down to the south coast, and it was like, well, look, you wait an hour for a GP appointment, for your appointment for an hour. Now, you don't mind, you know, GPs do run behind time, that's fine. Yeah. But what finished me off was when I deliberately booked a 2 p.m. appointment, because I had to be at work at 3:30, and I thought, well, that's plenty of time.
Yeah.
I left that GP surgery at 2:45 without seeing the GP, no matter how much the receptionist said, look, she's got to go to work. The GP just completely ignored it and, excuse my language, fart-assed around for 3/4 of an hour. And I only just barely made it to work on time because I had a good half hour, 40-minute drive.
Yeah.
That was my first experience, and also kind of being treated like we can't tell you anything. You know,
yeah, trivialized.
Look, it really is trivial. It's because everything is blamed on the fact that you're old.
Yes.
You know, and when a doctor says, what can you expect at your age? I say better service than I'm getting from you at the moment.
Absolutely.
You know, basically, I am here because I am ill. I worked and paid my taxes so you could be trained as a doctor. Now you doctor and tell me what's wrong with me now. Not, oh, what do you expect at your age? I expect to be treated like my health is your issue. And I think we've got to start having those conversations.
Yeah.
We're talking about trying to run, to develop a training module for anybody within the health sector to look at the way that you listen to and treat people of an age. Because we've got evidence, and you've seen our video, of that lady who had really bad arthritis, and she was left in agony for years.
Yeah.
And change of doctor said, well, you should never have been in that pain. So she had all of that time in pain, and there was no need for it.
And that trauma.
Nobody listened to her.
And that trauma. Well, I've got a good GP now, but one of the things he said to me, why have you changed? You know, and it's been a reasonably recent change, you know, towards the latter of last year. And I said, they don't teach communication skills at doctor school anymore. And I said, by the way, I was 64 at the time. I'm 65 now, so it was before October. I said, by the way, you can call this ageism, but I'm 64. I'm not 92. And he just laughed and he said, yeah, they don't do a lot of communication skills, but he's very good. these days I'm more embarrassed with how often I actually turn up at the GP.
Look, I think it's really about looking around. I think it's not, the difficulty is for people in rural areas, they don't have a lot of choice. They have to deal with the one doctor that's in town. I mean, I'm in the city, so if I don't like my doctor, and I happen to like my doctor, if I don't like my doctor, I just go, right, you're finished, and I'll go find someone else. So that you've got that choice. And the way that you change behaviours is you're not prepared to put up with it. You say, you are treating me like I am not even human. I'm not coming back here anymore. And you go and find someone else. If enough of these patients say that to them, they're going to have to snap out of it, because they're not going to get their business. They're not going to get their patients. So it's really about, we're from a generation that you're always polite to, doctors and the police and people like that. But I think you've got to actually stand up and start saying, that's not good enough.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to be treated like that. Thank you. Unless you give me the service that I deserve, I'm not going to be treated like that.
Well, I had a bit of a debate with the second doctor I changed to after I got sick of the first. And there's only 3 doctor surgery in my town, so I didn't have a lot of choice. And I had a bit of a what you would call a running debate, and sent an email and etc. and said, it's for a person with mental illness to be ignored is very dangerous of their physical health issues. To then decide that the person is getting older and it's all to do with age is again very dangerous, because it then denies a person has a problem, but B, problems can be quite life-threatening as a result. And as the lady that you talked about with the arthritis, they're lucky that she didn't actually decide, I don't want to live here any longer, and take herself off planet Earth because of the pain that she was having to deal with and the deformities, and you wonder how many people they really are lucky have not actually committed suicide.
And that's why we're really quite supportive, apart from your right to choose, in the voluntary assisted dying bill, because to be approved for that, you have to have a specialist look at you. It's so that this woman, if she had decided with her arthritis it was just too painful to continue, and that it was going to kill her, provided she was going to be terminal within 12 months, a specialist would have come in and said, hey, hang on, there's no need for that. We've got this and that, and let's fix you up. The pain's gone. So if somebody was in that boat who was saying, I'm just going to be in this pain for the rest of my life, I just don't want to do it, they get a palliative care. They get a person who is their support worker as they go through the process of taking their own life, and they discover that there's no need. So you've got all of that network and support to actually force people to have a look at what's going on in the lives of those people, rather than just letting them suffer in silence. And
it's criminal that that health services have to be forced to actually look at the older person, whether they're male or female, and actually, dare I say, care.
Look, I think it comes down, it's ageism, and we're as guilty of it as the next person. We'll see somebody young and just go, young, what do you expect? And we're just as ageist as anybody else is. But it's actually challenging that ageism and challenging it right at its source, that we know that our grandkids love us. We know that they think that we're the best thing, and we know they grieve when we fall off the planet. They don't want us to leave because we've got really good relationships. Why is it when somebody doesn't know us, they think somehow we're different? If our grandkids, irrespective of their age, all think that their grandparents are terrific, people working in the health industry have grandparents, have people who are older than them. It's bringing those links and contact, because politically it's expedient to have us divided, to have my generation called baby boomers. The boomers, we've stolen everything, we've ruined everything. Have a look at where we started. Have a look at the houses in Glebe and Balmain when I was born. There was nothing in them. They were poor houses. Have a look at the place that I live when I bought it 20 years ago. It was a burnt out hull. We're all in this together. It's nothing to do with baby boomers, nothing to do with baby boomers stealing everything. And it's nothing to do with young people having squashed avocado on toast. It's really helpful for governments that don't want to deliver services, irrespective of their flavour, to keep us all in our silos, looking over and firing bullets at one another. We kick those walls down and we find out that young people in homelessness are suffering as badly as old people in homelessness. Young people unemployed are suffering as badly as old people unemployed. Find out in the health system, mental health, irrespective of your age, people are suffering. If you've got any kind of, we're all in this together and we are allowing people to divide us off. Let's kick all those walls down. Say no. Because the one thing my father said to me, and it's one thing that I now find myself saying, the only thing I hasten to add, is that you have no idea what it's like to be my age, but I can remember what it was like to be yours. And I think that's the link. I can remember being 20. I can remember being 25. I can remember the smell of my baby, my first daughter, who's now 48, when I brought her home from hospital. Those things are hardwired in. Now, I know what it's like to be 20. I know the frustrations of being 16. I know all of those things. I haven't forgotten them. I know that they're there. I just put a different lens over them because as I've got older, that lens has thickened, warped, changed, and moved away. But it doesn't mean I don't remember. It doesn't mean I don't remember the frustration of being told you're too young, what would you know? You know, and of being you're too old, what would you know? You know, it's that continuum. So I think that all of us have a responsibility to try to reach out across generations.
Does it come to just basic respect for one another and that each party has an integral part to our society and that none of us are better or worse than the other? It's just mutual respect all around.
Look, it is, I mean, respect is one of those words I don't like to use very much because there are people I simply do not respect. I may treat them respectfully, but I don't respect them.
Yeah.
So it's looking at what sort of terminology, we're all people. It's treating somebody as another human being. And it's that really old adage, treat someone the way you would like to be treated, you know, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. I think if we take that back on as our golden rule, look at the things that would sort out. If you don't want somebody to steal from you, you don't steal. And if everybody thought along that lines, nobody would be stealing. You wouldn't be having all of the rip-offs and the targets and all of the crap that we see going on with people trying to get their money off them, steal their money, send them away, take their assets. We wouldn't see that because we would have as an underlying principle, if you wouldn't like it done to you, don't do it to someone else.
And there's also a saying, what goes around comes around.
Except it doesn't seem to come around fast enough in some instances.
No,
I agree.
You'd like to hurry it along a little bit.
Yes.
How do you go about breaking down those walls that, you know, you say kick down the walls? How do you go about doing that? And how do you go, I know how I would, but in the mass scale of things, where everybody sees themselves as the most important thing. How do you actually go around and knock that down for the greater?
It's the same way we do everything. You talk, you have conversations with people. You don't go in with predetermined ideas. I mean, I'm not saying you don't go in to see politicians with predetermined ideas. I mean, there's a couple there that you think, yeah, I know you're thinking, but you actually go in with an open mind and you ask open-ended questions. So you don't come in with an idea of telling, you come in with an idea of asking, you know, like, what do you reckon? You know, I think this sucks. What do you reckon? You know, and, oh, I don't know. So then you've got a gap that you can show and speak and talk because all of us have networks of friends and people from all different backgrounds and all different ages. And it's engaging in those conversations and bringing people on board. We work across the age groups as an organisation. Yes, we represent the views of older women, but we don't tell you when you're an older woman. If you know, we wouldn't turn anyone away who wanted to come and participate. We don't care. It's not an issue. We work with youth organisations. We work with homeless. We work with people who have got you know, mental issues. We work across the board because we want those lines of communication opened so that so we can't be played off one against the other. And it's the playing one against the other that does it.
And on that note, I think we'll come in with our little poem, Beverly.
Okay.
We like to have a little poem, and it's called Yes, I'm Older, Give Me a Break. Sue, would you like to start?
Okay. Went to see my doctor the other day. Wanted to hear from him if I am okay. Had some questions to ask. All he did was sit and laugh, telling me you're getting older, so suck it up instead of being bolder.
Went to see my specialist the other day. Kind of got lost trying to find my way. He looked at me, then glanced at his screen, and 8 minutes later, his receptionist said, over $100, please. But I have a pensioner card, I summoned the courage to say. Yes, that's the pensioner's discount, so this is the gap you have to pay.
Went for a job interview the other day. The employer took one look at me and said, no way. You're too skilled for this job, so please don't waste my time. But I said I need to earn a living too. Is my age now a crime? Looks I received told me, and those around me all, you too old for this job, so run off to the Centrelink stall.
Went to the government office the other day. They're wanting us oldies to pick up the slack and the hay. For aged care centres and other types of jobs, would you believe? Next, I'll make it mandatory. I work for the pension I receive. We're too old for this and too old for that. But when it suits them, they come running for us to pick up the slack.
Went to the aged care home the other day. Looked at the older people sitting in chairs, dreaming their days away. For $6 a day, they say they will give me breakfast, lunch and tea. Too bad if I don't like the food either, eat it or go hungry. My bones may be brittle, my joints may be aching, but my marbles are intact. Yes, I'm older, and ageism in this country has definitely become a fact.
Penny, for your thoughts, Beverly.
No, the poem was interesting. It was fun, and it's an attempt to sum up what we face. You know, we do face ageism. We do face that on a daily basis, but we're not the only ones that face ageism. So it's really, really, really an important message. We've just got to keep giving to people. That, you know, we're all in this together and we're all on the continuum, because what I'm seeing is there's an encouragement for people to be at war with their older self, to loathe their older self, because unless the meteorite hits, they're all going to get older one day. And it's absolute insanity to declare a war on the self that you are yet to be. And I think that it's up to us who are there to continue to remind people that unless something really bad happens, one day they will be us. We are standing here, and one day it'll be your feet will be in our shoes.
Yeah, exactly.
And on that note, this is Desley Casey and
Sue Pavlic
saying thank you very much, Beverly, for your words of wisdom. And this is from Reality Bytes saying thank you for listening or watching, and bye for now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.